Good evening, everyone. Welcome to another EISA online event. We have an important topic today, mobility injustices. As a professional organization, we want to raise awareness to advocate for fairer academic environments to foster equity and inclusivity. Many of our colleagues or our students face enormous challenges, a myriad of mobility injustices that hinder their ability to secure stable academic positions, studies, to harness opportunities and build fulfilling careers. We believe that these challenges not only obstruct their professional growth, but also deprive academia of diverse and valuable perspectives. This is why we organized this event, to shed some light on the obstacles scholars at risk encounter. And I'm happy to welcome Vera Aksionova, Assistant Professor, Lecturer in European Politics at the University of Birmingham, Reda Mahajar, Part-time Lecturer in Sociology at the University of Antwerp, Ashley Telly, Associate Researcher at the Global South Studies Center, Cologne University, and Mohamed Bakit, Postdoctoral Fellow at Philip Schwartz Initiative for Researchers at Risk, to discuss this important topic. I want to thank all our attendees today. Thanks so much for joining us. And without further delay, I want to give the floor to Vera. Vera, I know you've done research on this topic and you've advocated for this topic in the past. Could you please explain us the obstacles, the challenges scholars who face mobility injustices confront? We even have challenges when we decided to organize this event. So do you want to elaborate on them?
Yes, thank you so much, Rebecca. Let me start by saying that in order to answer the questions that you just posed, you need to go in a way a step back and look into the problematic of how we connect mobility and the strive for internationalization in academia. Mobility in the last years has become an indispensable feature of modern globalized academic systems, right? It is regarded both as a mechanism and as an indicator of internationalization processes in research and in higher education. And internationalization, in turn, is often seen as an ultimate good, right? As a desirable capital in the global knowledge economy, which seems to, in a way, automatically lead to transcultural learning, knowledge circulation, and all-inclusive cosmopolitan academia. Hence, both academic mobility and internationalization processes are promoted through policies and discourses at institutional, national, and supranational levels. However, how internationalization and mobility in research and higher education are conceptualized, how they are connected, and how they are discussed about, does not necessarily reflect how the practices of how they are performed and experienced by scholars, especially when it comes to at-risk scholars or displaced academics. Why is this the case? I would argue that there are three aspects or three dimensions of ideal typical mobility, which makes it highly problematic. First of all, this is the presumed nature of mobility, the space and the time. Concerning the first feature or the first dimension, the presumed nature of mobility, the very conception of mobility for internationalization in higher education suggests that this process is supposed to be a voluntary process. Hence, it ignores the existence of large numbers of scholars who were forced to be on the move, who were forced to be mobile due to worse political persecution or other forms of political violence. So institutional responses to this phenomenon of displaced or exiled scholars have found a name by now. It has been termed in 2019 by Hakan Ergin and colleagues forced internationalization. And the assumption is here that eventually forced internationalization can have similar positive effects as voluntary internationalization would have, both for institutions, for host institutions including, and for individuals. However, it doesn't necessarily happen in reality. The excellence-driven logics of voluntary mobility programs are very difficult to reconcile with the humanitarian logics of support programs for at-risk scholars. And the chance for displaced scholars to benefit from regular mobility programs is close to zero, especially if the scholars are applying for asylum, which makes them to very immobile subjects, in fact. Second, the space dimension or the space aspect of mobility. When we talk about mobility, especially in the context of internationalization in research and higher education, we mainly mean geographical mobility from place A to place B. And this is the type of mobility that is commonly expected and rewarded by research funders when you speak of promotion, for instance. However, the question remains here, within which geographical spaces it is attractive and possible to move. If you look at career trajectories of those who are considered to be highly successful academics, their career paths rarely include mobility across spaces that are considered to be the core and the periphery of global knowledge production. Finally, the time aspect. The basic assumption behind the research mobility is its temporality, right? So meaning that you are expected to move from place A to place B for a relatively short period of time, ranging from a few months to a couple of years. The aspect of temporality is, however, strongly linked to the issue of resources. And these resources are quite diverse, right, in their nature. This can be financial resources, because you're expected every time you move across borders and across countries, you're expected to start all over again, right, in a new place. And none of the funding schemes, including those for at-risk scholars, cover the respective expenses in their entirety. More importantly, though, the resources are not only material, we are also talking about immaterial resources that are at stake. These are family and social bonds that every time you move, you are expected to leave behind or take with you, if this is possible at all. This is physical health that you need to possess to be able to be constantly on the move. And this is mental stability and a certain state of mind, if you will, that is necessary to deal with the instability of life circumstances caused by mobility. Only if you possess all of these resources and ideally a place to which you can return, can you expect to truly benefit from experiences of academic mobility. When it comes to at-risk scholars who often have precarious passports and precarious residence permits, the push for short-term mobility in funding programs, for instance, in the sense of a temporary move to another academic environment, is entirely out of context, as it completely disregards the limits of the scholars' legal status that they exist in migration regimes. In fact, this push for mobility excludes those who are already forced to move across borders, and through this very move became very much immobile. I'll stop here and give the chance to the others to have very concrete examples, maybe.
Thank you, Vera. To be honest, I wanted to follow up and talk a little bit about also the fear and the stigma involved, because I think that this is a big part of the experience scholars at risk face. And we can go to Reda to share with us his experience, and I will come back with those questions about fear and stigma. Reda. You need to unmute your...
sake. Yeah. Yes, thank you. Thank you so much, Rebecca. So thank you so much for everybody, making this event happens. I'm going just now sharing my screen. I hope you can see my full screen. Can you see it?
Yes, we can.
Perfect. Okay. Good evening, everybody. So glad and honored to be speaking at this event. This event speaks personally to my journey as a lifelong refugee who faced so many obstacles as, a scholar at risk. So tonight I'm going to address that by wavering it into my own struggle and experience. Today I will be talking about these 3 points: my long struggle as a researcher refugee, the mobility injustice of the European Research Agency and the European Research Council, and why SAFE funding, which is just, was launched this year or last year, at the end of last year, why is it too little and too difficult for scholars at risk like me? So my story begins in the city of Lahore in Pakistan in the 1960s. My father decided at that time to migrate to the Iraqi city of Karbala, which is southwest of Baghdad, to study Shia theology. This was when in the 1960s. Saddam Hussein in 1970 became the vice president. My father opposed him. So Saddam imprisoned and tortured my father. When my father emerged from the prison, he said, "Where is the safest country in the world?" Well, this was late 1970s, early 1980s. Syria, at that time, was the safest country in the world. So I was born there in 1981 as a refugee from a parents who themselves were refugees. I lived over 30 years in Syria, and I didn't even have citizenship or even a permanent residency. I lived through temporary residency that would be renewed for 3 months, 6 months, or 12 months at the best. And I have to renew it every time. And very often, I wasn't really sure how whether they will accept renewing it or not. So in the year 2010, I met an alumni from Princeton University, and he told me, "Reda, why don't you apply to Princeton University?" And he put me in contact with the academics at the Middle Eastern department. They were receptive to my potential application. So this was the year 2010. I said, let me take a gap year to prepare for the GRE. What could possibly go wrong in Syria in 2011? Well, guess what? The Syrian civil war broke out. I was chained in Syria, basically because of my passport. In Lebanon, the government assumed everybody in Syria, was Syrian, so they could cross the border with a Syrian ID card. But as a Pakistani, I need to apply for a visa. And the Lebanese embassy was closed already because of the Syrian civil war. So what I did, I enrolled at the University of London. They had a distance learning program through University College London. This was my only way of pursuing my master degree. So before Zoom and Teams, we had a Blackboard. So each time there would be an audio connection, everybody would say, "Can you hear me loud and clear?" When my turns comes, I would tell them, "If you heard an explosion in the background, don't be disturbed. This is everyday business here." In 2013, there was this, Barack Obama chemical weapon red line that he said, if the Syrian regime use chemical weapon, this is a red line and we're going to punish the Syrian regime. At that moment, Lebanon opened its border for everybody in Syria, including me. I became again a refugee in Lebanon. This time, with temporary residency of 1 month, 3 months, or 6 months at best. And at each moment, I didn't know whether it would be renewed again or not. And I was very fearful that I would be sent back to the chaos that I escaped from Syria. So 2016 came in. I got 6-year full PhD scholarship at the State University of New York in the sociology department. I went to the American embassy. I told them I have 6-year fully funded PhD scholarship at the State University of New York. They told me, Reda, you don't have sufficient ties to return back either to Lebanon or Syria after the end of your PhD program. So we are not going to give you the visa. Next year, 2017, the same thing happened. State University of New York renewed its 6-year scholarship offer, but the American embassy didn't budge. At the very same year, 2017, I got another scholarship at Brooke University in St. Catherine in Canada for 5 years, fully funded. However, it fell short of the financial visa requirement of the Canadian student visa, so I didn't get the visa again. 2018, I got a third or fourth scholarship here at the Brussels School of International Studies, University of Kent. I had $400 with me, and I went to the Belgium embassy. They said, all the papers are fine. We need $400 to give you for the visa application. I gave them the $400, and when I emerged from the embassy, I told myself, what do you do there? You give them the last $400 you have, and most likely they will reject your visa, just like the American and the Canadian. But guess what? They didn't. So I came to Brussels and started my PhD studies. In 2020, the academics crowdfunded to pay for my immigration lawyer. In 2021, I was recognized as official, or as finally, for the first time, as officially a refugee. This is becomes like my citizenship now. In March 2023, I became officially Dr. Reda. 1 week later, the University of Kent announced that it's going to close my university at the Brussels School of International Studies in the following academic year. Now comes the mobility injustice that I'm facing. The European Research Agency and the European Research Council, the funding that they offer dominate the landscape of the research opportunities and postdoc funding in Belgium. Yet, they have this mobility requirement, which automatically exclude me from applying for any of these funding. It says that a postdoc or a researcher must not have lived or worked in the host country, in this case, Belgium, over the last 12 months in the last 3 years before the call deadline. I spoke to the agency. I wrote to the focal point here, and they contacted the headquarters. They didn't budge. I told them, I have this refugee status. It is extremely difficult for me to go to another European country for that. They said, we were not going to change it for you. There's nothing we can do. And as a refugee, it's really difficult to move from one place to other. I have the residency or the work permit here or the temporary document that allows me to work in Belgium, but not to work in another European country. And this is really the challenge. Now, last year, at the end of last year, there was this SAFE funding, which is targeting specifically the refugees. However, there are problems, a few challenges. While it's a good start, there's a few challenges that are coming with this. First, there's only 60 scholarships for tens of thousands of applicants from within the European Union and the Global South, those who qualify as researchers at risk. The candidate must prove the level of, the danger that they are facing, the level of stress they are facing. And this turns into a metric for the selection by the university administration. However, at the same time, scholars at risk need to focus on survival and finding refuge, limiting a research output. And this is the other contradiction in this. So unfair criteria, it says grants are awarded upon publication numbers, excluding those who are most affected by conflict and repression. Remember, the first benchmark is that you need to establish that you are facing a life-threatening situation. At the same time, they expect you to have, a normal kind of academic output like the rest of the academics. And here, a scholar, I think, at Ghent University, he explained more in details the challenges with this, and I cited him here. The other challenge is that in Europe, each university has to select one candidate only, one candidate for the entire university. So, and most likely in every university, they will have preference for people they are familiar with, those who did their master's or PhD at their universities. And it is disadvantage for outsiders. People from a closing institution like mine, my university closed. Now I don't have a university to file this application on my behalf. Scholars with limited part-time guest lectureship or nominal research affiliation, again, like me, we face systematic barriers within this, scholarship scheme, let alone those coming from the global south. I would end with just a happy note here. So, my first name in Arabic, Rada, means happy. And my last name in Arabic, Muhajir, mean migrants. So if you put them together, it becomes a happy migrant. So this is the story of this happy migrant facing the challenges of mobility and justice. Thank you all for listening to me. Rebecca, we are muted.
I'm sorry. Thank you, Reda, for sharing your moving story. And I feel that many of us cannot understand the volume of disappointment and uncertainty and fear such experiences involve. And unfortunately, Reda's story is not unique. Many of our colleagues face similar stories. Mohammed, do you want to share your experiences with us?
Thank you so much for the opportunity. And I think, yes, I would be happy to share my experience, although I think it is a little bit different from the reader's experience, but also it shows, I think, the diversity of experience of researchers at risk, or to say generally, the displaced scholars. Because also I displaced from my country in 2013. I am originally from Sudan, in which in April 2023, the war erupted there, and I have to displaced from my work in University of Khartoum. I was associate professor there. And then I moved to another city in the country, in another safe state. And then when the war also reached that place, I had to move outside. I moved outside to Uganda. And then I applied for Philip Schwartz Initiative for Researchers at Risk. It is a scholarship for at-risk researchers in Germany, based in Germany, and funded by Alexander von Humboldt. And I was lucky to get successful application and to get this scholarship. And that is because I did my PhD before in Germany, in the University of Bayreuth. Then I waited there for more than 6 months to receive my family in Uganda, and then to apply for visa to come to Germany. And then it was really difficult also because of, I think this is I think experience not only by refugee maybe or displaced people, but generally it is the movement or the mobility of people from global south to global north is becoming more and more difficult, and it will be more specifically for displaced people. So they asked us to go to Ethiopia, Addis Ababa, in order to apply there. It was not possible to apply in Kampala, in Uganda, because the German embassy in Sudan relocated to Addis Ababa. So we had to move there and to apply there and wait for a few weeks until we get, but successfully get the visa. And then we moved last July last year to Germany. But then I think my story now it goes to a different position than Rida if I compare it with Rida, because Rida started by applying for refugee, but then for me it was not possible to apply for refugee status, although technically I would be able to do so. I am coming from a country where there is a war until now going on. But because if I apply for refugee and I get refugee status, then it will hinder my research. Because what I got is a postdoctoral research where I have to do a research where I have to do a field work, which is in Uganda. So I have to move outside European Union to do my research, because I am anthropologist, so I have to live in the field work, and I have to meet the people and make an interview, group discussion, and so on. So it was not possible for me to apply for, or I decided not to apply um, for refugee status, because I need my freedom of mobility, at least until I finish my field work, which will be in the summer of this year. Besides that, also I need the freedom of mobility also to attend conferences, to attend meetings, to advance really my career. I think I think it mentioned that at the beginning, that the scholars need freedom of movement in order to pursue their career and to move to different places. So because of that, the fear from these problems coming with refugee status, we decided to delay applying for refugee status. And so far we are staying Germany with the scholarship, and the scholarship is continue for 2 years with possible extension for 3 years, depending on the university where I'm based now. So it is really very fragile status, so it's a very uncertain status, but I think we have to navigate it and see how it is going on. And I think really, so the issue of mobility of scholarship is really very difficult issue and very sensitive issue. And as you mentioned at the beginning, also the issue of the stigma of being a refugee, which is and because of the media, I am a scholar of refugee studies also, and displacement. I'm a anthropologist, so I do a lot of research and I teach in this field of research. So I know how refugees are depicted, especially, and how the sentiments of the people and the public is going against refugee in general in Europe and the global north in general. So for many researchers, I think they might prefer not included in this category, although that might be better for their security, for their future, especially if their country is not safe. But it become, I think at the end of the day, it become a kind of a balance. You have to make the balance and to make the decision which you think is better to your career, to your future, whether is to stay with scholarships, with grants, without applying for refugee status, or you apply for refugee status and then you get the constraints which my colleague Rida got it. So I think that is the issue become how to make that balance. I think I stop here, and maybe in the discussion we can talk more. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mohammed. And before giving the floor to Asli to discuss actionable strategies, I want to discuss a little bit more about what Mohammed said, the stigma of being a refugee, the fear, the uncertainty, and the different personal strategies scholars adopt in order to avoid the stigma and to survive in our open, otherwise, communities. Vera, do you want to elaborate a little bit more on those challenges? And I want to share with our audience, our attendees, that it was difficult for us to find people to talk today to this event about their experiences because of the stigma or because of the fear.
Yes, thank you, Rebecca, for touching upon this aspect. I think the stigma issue is a very real one, and particularly, I think the research into forced academics who had to leave Ukraine is very indicative of that. The interviews have shown, multiple interviews have shown with Ukrainian scholars who had to leave the country after the start of the major war in 2022, that they explicitly decided not to call themselves refugees and were also reluctant to accept for themselves and internalize the status of being protected. This shows, on the one hand, the fear of the stigma, and on the other hand, the kind of self-struggle, right, to trying to wrap your head around the fact that you have been now forcibly displaced from your country due to the circumstances of war. But there is also another aspect related to what you were saying in terms of finding scholars and speakers for this event and the difficulty to do so. And that is not only related to the stigma in the perception of the eyes of colleagues, of peers, but also the fear of transnational repression. Many scholars who have left their countries because of political persecution, a real one, so real ongoing court cases, or potentially being persecuted by the state, they still have their families living in their home countries, and openly admitting that you were forced to leave your country due to the fear of political persecution can very much backfire on the families who are still remaining in the countries. That is another aspect why for many scholars it is extremely difficult to speak in the public about their difficulties and about their status and how they are connected, and the fact that whether you are applying for asylum or not applying for asylum but still had to leave your country, admitting to this fact openly is connected to a lot of anxieties and fears that are very, very real, also for scholars who are considered to have found safe havens in Europe.
Thank you, Vera. And Ashley, what can we do to fight mobility injustices to our communities? Are there any actionable strategies to foster equity and inclusivity? And a related question is, at what level do we have to advocate to the EU, but at the same time, we can all advocate within our universities or within our scholarly communities, which is also important, the everyday changes we can make. What do you think?
I definitely agree, Rebecca. And in addition to that, my solidarity and also, humble feelings go to my colleagues in this panel. I think Vera is completely right. And also, it comes from the heart to point out that it's also almost impossible and very discomforting for the individuals to share their personal narratives. Due to transnational repression, it also has become digital. Digital transnational repression is really at outrageous levels at the moment. And also out of personal well-being, because you're characterized, you're portrayed as an at-risk scholar, refugee scholar, a scholar that's displaced, and even that is enough to create the fear and stigma. But of course, things don't end there. Life doesn't end there. There is definitely a lot we can do. Also locally, through our own support networks, I've been seeing that being developed a lot. Also with the colleagues coming from Ukraine, for instance, they have their own networks being developed. Colleagues coming from the Middle East, including Turkey, we have been trying to get in connection with not only each other, but also with colleagues coming from neighboring countries and Global South in general. I think these connections are really important. Both the universities and the supporting and the funding organizations also need to be aware of what's going on and be aware of the structural as well as the systemic injustices. And that's why I think policy work is really efficient. And I find the work of academics in solidarity really essential in that regard, even though the network or I think I can call it the support network that existed for a few years, but doesn't really exist anymore due to funding constraints. But it's been possible for me and a colleague of mine from Turkey. We had been both politically persecuted due to a peace petition to come up with a policy paper. A workshop was organized in the network. We joined the workshop, and through rigorous training, we could actually come up with a policy brief on what can be done and how these can be done by the involvement and active inclusion of the displaced scholars themselves. So I can actually share quickly a slide with you, which summarizes all that. Sorry, I think this was the wrong one. Let me, yes, this should be it. Right. Okay. So this is basically survival mechanisms, I'm calling it, in mobility or immobility, as my colleagues presenting beforehand have been narrating very clearly. In Europe, but of course, if there are participants joining us from other parts of the world, their experiences would also be very welcome. And I think there is a lot of similarities in what's being faced in different regions. So this will be a synthesis of the Inspire Europe report that came out in 2020, at the end of 2024, and the AIS policy paper. It was more of a brief that we have written a few years ago. So I will not go through all of it, all of the sketch that I've made in this map, but maybe a quick overview of the Inspire Europe initiative. It's a multi-actor initiative that aims to support, promote, and integrate researchers at risk in Europe. It also recognizes the importance of academic freedom, need for systemic improvements. It's a project backed by the Horizon 2020 Research and Innovation Program. We've spoken, I think, very briefly, but also clearly already on the context of researchers at risk. So I will quickly go to the recommendations. This will be a synthesis, like I said, of the Inspire Europe report and our policy brief. As in many, let's say, accounts of colleagues, first, support for researchers at risk and their risk status need to be acknowledged and supported. Thus, policies should align with that. One thing that we noticed is the language issues. So Germany being the example, and German being a very tough language to learn, we just noticed that the temporary fellowships that only extend to maximum 3 years would not really somehow suffice in terms of learning the language, which would take at least 1 to 2 years, and then carrying out your research. So one thing that we suggested in our policy brief was reserving extra time for learning the language of the host country. Also establishing a dedicated European fellowship scheme. This somehow has started finding its place, maybe through the PSI initiative, also the SAFE project, the SAFE initiative that formerly was explained, but these are all very temporary solutions, of course. And considering the immobility and the visa constraints of the global South, remote fellowships and tandem fellowships, which is also exercised in, for instance, New University in Exile Consortium, the OFF University initiative, which is mostly an initiative of the exile colleagues living in Europe, but working closely with colleagues in the global South. The Tandem Initiative is also working in close relation with the institutions, universities in Europe, but also outside of Europe. So this we think would be a good option in terms of the remote possibilities. Creating national support programs. This is partly done through, again, PSI, CARA, and PAUSE, which have been also the members of the Inspire Europe initiative. But regular employment programs and diaspora support networks should be in this picture. So the partnerships with NGOs and educational agencies, which exist in the Scholars at Risk wider network, should also be expanded to other global South countries so that the different opportunities that already exist in those countries, or those needs that need to be addressed, are also included in the wider Scholars at Risk network. So access to existing European funding programs, we have been speaking about this. There is the MSCA program for Ukraine. So this is reserved to colleagues coming from Ukraine, but how about the other countries? There are many war zones right now in the world, and so these initiatives need to be expanded. So again, long-term prospects. These long-term prospects also should include contracts, since there are no, let's say, permanent contracts. Even if the contracts are temporary, they should include social insurance and social security, health benefits as well. Because of the lack of these social benefits, a lot of the colleagues have problems getting their residence permit, let alone extending them. And of course, opportunities beyond academia are also important. And in that, basically, universities can facilitate transitions to other sectors by accreditation programs or training programs. And definitely, non-academic employers should actively include researchers at risk, but this is all beyond academia. Of course, there would be colleagues, and I would understand that, who would not want to leave academia. So in those terms, the mobility concept definitely needs to be reinserted and reconsidered. And intersectionality is definitely really important. This was also highlighted in our policy brief. The gender and equality offices should be in contact with other offices, definitely the Welcome Office, which is let's say, direct and first contact with the displaced researchers that arrive at the institution, because a number of issues are specific to our colleagues at risk. And so these institutions need to work in parallel in order to serve for the mental health of the colleagues as well as their families. And one really, let's say, positive contribution would be the researchers with displacement experience as a part of these structures. So selection committees, as well as those offices with intersectionality measures, definitely need this insight from researchers with such experiences. And so this would be another idea, another suggestion. And this would also provide a career pathway to the displaced researchers. And as we've been talking about since the beginning of this webinar, definitely the visa pathways and the mobility constraints need to be reconsidered, and host institutions should also assist in the visa application process, as well as new policies inserted and the policy practitioners being aware of the implementations. Thank you.
Thank you, Ashley. There are always strategies or policies, but we need also some willingness and political willingness, institutional willingness. And we also need to understand as much as we can the challenges our colleagues confront. This is why we organized this event to raise awareness. And we also have attendees that face such challenges and want to share their experiences with us. And also we have a question for Dmitry Dubrovsky. Thank you very much. How you would evaluate mobility injustice to Russian scholars who fled Russia escaping repression and war and met serious issues concerning with visa ban in numerous European countries? Who wants to answer? Personally, I think that we all condemn mobility injustices, irrespectively of the scholar's country of origin. Vera, do you want to say something?
Sure. Thank you so much for the question. I mean, the issues that scholars who fled Russia after the start of the Russo-Ukrainian war in 2022, they were not only limited to the visa ban or visa issues, the difficulties to get new visas or to prolong visas. They were also connected to very basic issues like opening a banking account, for instance. Back then, I was working at the University of Vienna in Austria, and we had multiple cases of students who were not able to receive their stipends for that very reason, that their bank accounts were basically frozen, or they could not open bank accounts in order to continue their studies. These are also very real issues, and what I have observed during my work back then was, of course, that there was much more openness on the part of the university structures towards scholars who were coming from Ukraine, as opposed to those who were coming from Russia or from Belarus, very much simultaneously, so at the same time. And right now, as time has passed, we see that especially scholars who fled Belarus are very much sidelined by other world crises, world conflicts, and so on. And the fact that there are so many countries of origin that from which scholars flee creates, in a way, also structural inequalities, I would argue, and not only in terms of mobility injustices, but very basic survival in the host countries, in the countries of destination. These injustices, however, or this unequal treatment, they in many cases, they are rather artificial. They do not need to be there. And there can be structural and systemic responses in order to deal with those. As they mentioned, some of them, we need definitely a more extensive and intensive discussion with policymakers and with university administrations in terms of how to tackle those. And these processes of negotiation, of interaction with university structures, with policymakers, they need to be inclusive of scholars coming from different country backgrounds in order to understand what the challenges of particular scholar communities are, because they differ a lot. Thank you.
Thank you, Vera. And another question for Asli. Can you tell us more about whether your policy brief suggestions were adopted?
I can actually say they were partly adopted. We knew that there were certain, let's say, suggestions that were already in work in progress, like language programs, for instance. The number of them were at least expanded, increased. But of course, a year wasn't added, for instance, to learn an extra year wasn't added to learn the language of the host country. But awareness towards, let's say, language learning somehow was there. And I can say, for instance, the contracts, because a lot of the colleagues did not work under contracts. And this was made possible, at least maybe not due to only our policy brief, but also the advocacy, the general advocacy, also through the support networks and universities, the different offices in the universities. So through the PSI initiative, for instance, you had a choice of working through a contract, an employment contract, with social insurance and health benefits, so that this could be counted towards your pension. While your salary would be decreased because a certain amount needs to be somehow debited from what you're getting, but at least you would have some kind of security, and that would work towards your pension and also your visa permits and temporary residence, or your residence applications, residential applications. And of course, another structural recommendation we made was the connection between the welcome office and the gender and equality offices, for instance, so that colleagues with facing difficulties, facing different issues in terms of their social status or mental health and well-being in the very institution that they're working in, but also with their families, could somehow be in a safer zone, or could somehow be visible, at least with their problems. That was addressed partly by the hosting institutions, I noticed. And so things are developing, things are better than it used to, but at the same time, the world is in a worse state. And so a lot of insecurities and displacement issues are increasing in number. So when you somehow compare that, the ratio that is somehow in the, let's say, facilities, increased facilities, and what the world is turning into, of course, there's still a lot to do. But I think the policy practitioners are more aware of the specific issues the displaced scholars are facing, and that's at least a good start.
Thank you, Asli, and actually thank you for giving us some hope, finally. Thank you so much for this event today, to our speakers for making this event happen, for our attendees for attending the event and for sharing their experiences. I believe it's critical for scholars at risk, but also for our academic communities to create safe, equal, inclusive academic environments. I know that this is an effort, but it should be taken at multiple levels. And what we try today is to raise some awareness within our community. Thank you very much.